Thank you everyone for being here. I'd like to welcome you to today's roundtable on Google Analytics. This roundtable is brought to you by Renewed, the open network for specialized subscription, membership, and event professionals. My name is Sue Stevens, and I'm the Executive Director for Renewed Europe, and I'll be moderating today's event. If you have any questions for today's speakers, you can submit them throughout the presentation and at the end during the Q&A session by using the chat function. After the presentation, you'll have access to the recording. We'll send you an email with the link once that's available online. Please keep yourself on mute to minimize background noise. Do turn on your videos if you can. It makes a big difference to see some faces. And please put your name and company in the box so we know who's asking questions. So on to today's session. I'd like to introduce you to the team from MPG. MPG is one of Renewed's partner members and is a B2B marketing consultancy and full service marketing agency. They specialize in delivering marketing strategies, operations, and campaigns for specialized B2B media and events businesses. Today's session will take us through what Google Analytics is and how the latest version, GA4, works, together with common challenges and pitfalls and how to overcome them. I'm going to hand over to MPG CEO and founder Helen Coetzee now to give a bit more information on MPG and get the session started. So, Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And thank you everyone for being here. It's great that you could join us today. In addition to myself representing MPG, we have got about 4 or 5 other MPG representatives here to listen in and chat in the chats and answer questions. The 3 MPG people who will be speaking today, or our kind of organized ourselves to say something. We might have some other MPG people diving in. The 3 main representatives are myself, Lucy Peppercorn, who is our head of analytics and reporting in MPG, and Alicia Drew, who's one of our senior directors. So Lucy and Alicia will also be participating in the presentation today. We've got some Q&A at the end. So Lucy will go through her presentation first, and we've got some polls as well, which is always exciting. And then we've got some Q&A at the end, and also a little bit of information about how we package up MPG's analytics services in case you're interested in that towards the end. So if we just go to the next slide, let me just tell you a little bit about MPG so we can contextualize things for you. So a lot of you know us already. A lot of you have worked with us to date. And some of you, I believe, we're working with at the moment. We're a team of 14 at the moment. We are growing. So by the end of this year, that number will be bigger. Been going for, this is our 12th year in existence. We are data-driven B2B marketing specialists. So we've always had data at the core of what we do, which is why GA4 is so important in the marketing service portfolio that we offer to our clients. The reason we are so data-driven is because we love marketing. As you can see, MPG loves marketing. And because we love marketing so much, we really want to make sure marketing makes a difference in every organization. It's accountable, it's transparent, it's strategic, it's commercially driving the performance of every business. And because we love marketing, we want marketing to make a really big difference in the commercial success of events. That's why we love data as well, because data is at the core of that at the end of the day. So with our data-driven approach, we deliver strategy planning and execution, and we are based in London, and we work with clients mainly in the UK and US, and also Europe, Asia, Middle East, and we market to audiences over the world. And these 3 service areas are listed there for you. The reason all that context is important, I guess, is because we've been going for 12 years. We've been doing data-driven B2B marketing for B2B media and events businesses for 12 years. Before that, I'd spent over 15 years in client side in B2B media and events businesses, also taking a data-driven approach, and all the best practices that we share, including today, including everything we're going to share with you today, comes from many, many years and many, many projects and many, many clients worth of experience. So we hope that we'll be presenting to you today the very best practices, the very, most sensible, wise words of wisdom and advice that we can share with you. And just as a quick kind of final note before I hand over to Lucy, or before I kind of go through what we're going to be going through today, is it's fair to say that every single client we work with has needed some form of support or help or work that we've delivered for them on GA4 or GTM conversion tracking. Either it's been put in place and it hasn't been done correctly, or it's not been done completely, or there's some gaps somewhere along the line, or it's not been set up in a way that fits their strategy. So we've every single project we've done, whether it's a PPC campaign or a multi-channel campaign or a marketing operations project, has just about every client has needed this type of support. And the reason is because we kind of focus on it so much is because it's absolutely essential to measuring marketing ROI. We hear a lot of our clients talking and companies in general talking about how marketing doesn't show ROI, doesn't prove ROI, marketing isn't accountable enough, marketing isn't, responsible enough for commercial revenue as it should be. There's no way you can expect your marketing to show ROI or measure ROI or deliver ROI if you haven't got your conversion tracking and your analytics properly set up. And especially these days where AI algorithms take a lot of that data that sits in those analytics and conversion tracking and pushes it back into campaigns to optimize them. It's no longer optional. You have to have this set up correctly. Otherwise, you're wasting money on a lot of the marketing that you're doing. So that's the kind of reason why we're here today and the reason why we so obsessed with GA4 and GTM. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk to you today about why Google Analytics matters. I think I've already shared some of that with you. The questions you should be able to answer about the Google Analytics setup in your business. Sometimes you're not using Google Analytics. You might be using a different analytics package. That's fine, but you should be able to answer these questions with whatever analytics package you're using. 3 common challenges and pitfalls that we found again and again and again in companies that we work with. What you can do about them. So some practical advice, things you need to do, just practical actions you need to take to move forward. And finally, resources available to help you. So I think that's the final point on the slide. So without further ado, oh, sorry, one more thing is after the session, if you feel you have more questions, etc., I'm going to share today's slides with all of you. So you will have the slides before we get the question in the chat. Yes, you'll get the slides. And if you want some more time with our analytics expert, please drop me a note. You can find me on LinkedIn or email. LinkedIn sometimes safer because emails can get lost, as we know these days. So drop me a note and we can set up a conversation, a follow-up conversation with you. Okay. And next we go into the first poll, I think, and this is where I hand over to Lucy, who knows a lot more about GA4 and GTM than I do. So handing over to Lucy and then Alicia.
Thanks very much, Helen. Just quick check, everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, great, cool. So yeah, we're going to start today's session with a quick poll. So that should appear on your screen very shortly. But what we're asking is at the start of this session, how confident are you currently in your current GA4 setup and that it is delivering what you need as a business? So we've got some options available to you. Apologies. There we go. Got some options available to you to vote. If you could put in your responses now. We'll give it just a second, and then what you'll do is see the results of those responses. So what you'll see is other businesses probably are going to be in a similar boat to yourself. We'll see what responses we've got. So it looks like we're somewhere in the middle, with only 4% currently feeling like they are confident and that their current GA4 setup is nailed. We've got most of the votes there split between they're getting there, but there's fine tuning to be done, and there is the majority of the votes there are just that we're not sure, we don't know what is there, and we can't say for certain. So this is a great opportunity for us to dive straight into GA4 and how it works, and hopefully help to give you some more information around what GA4 is and how it can be really integral for you in your business. So why does Google Analytics matter? Let's start off by how it works, and then we go into why it's essential for your business. So what is GA4? So GA4 is a digital analytics tool which is used to collect and analyze your website traffic and user engagement. There are other analytics tools out there. We're focusing particularly on Google for this. And it is offered as a free digital analytics tool with a paid for version as well. We also note here, collecting and analyzing your website traffic. I've got it on a couple of slides as well, but you can also use GA4 to collect mobile app traffic as well. It replaced the previous version, which was Universal Analytics, which might be a name that some on this call are more familiar with, to track how users interact with your website and, as I've said, mobile apps. Universal Analytics was actually the third iteration of Google Analytics, so therefore GA3. So now they've gone back to a numbered version. So that's all we mean by when we say GA4. So how does it work? GA4's data model is very different from Universal Analytics. This time it is built around events and not in events in the way that most of us are immediately thinking. We'll come into more detail on those. But this new data model allows for more precise tracking of user interactions across your websites and apps. So let's take a closer look at what events are and how they work. So an event in the terms of this particular presentation today is an interaction or action taken by a user on your website. So you can kind of substitute the word event here with interaction or action, or even hit if you're more familiar with that, taken by a user on your website. So here's our user, and we've got a session start. Now this session start is an event in this case. That's an interaction recorded by GA4. Here's a bunch more. These are all automatically out of the box collected events within GA4. So we've got here just a few, the scrolls, the clicks, they may be more familiar, the page views. It also out of the box collects things like site searches. So if you've got an on-site search for content, for example, maybe you've got videos, so interactions with videos, so starts and stops on videos, and also form starts and submits as well are an automatically collected event based on your structure of your website and your form platforms being standard. As I say, these are all automatically collected out of the box, but you can also set up things called custom events, which are specific actions that are relate to your specific customer journey in particular. So these could be custom interactions that you set up to record within GA4 that are only unique, I suppose, to your customer journey. So for example, you might have blog page views. So not just any page views. I want to record and count how many blog page views we have. It could be sharing a case study, or maybe it's watching a specific highlights video. These are all types of things that you could set up as custom events. And once you start to record those within GA4, you can then track the trends of those over time. So you can see when there's more of those interactions happening and less of those. And of course, you can then see impact. So if you send out an email, sending people to see blogs, for example, send out a newsletter, you might see those blog page views increase. So further to custom events, we can talk about key events. Now, key events are what used to be called goals within Universal Analytics, or what is known as conversions in online ad platforms. So key events, just the same word, just a different word for conversions or goals. So these are deemed to be events of greater importance. So something bottom of the funnel, something we want to aim to send our users to do when they're visiting our website. So some examples here, just very high-level ones: registering for our event, for example, self-serving and buying a ticket, or registering for a free to attend event on our website. It could be submitting an inquiry form, or maybe it's downloading a brochure indicating they're of highly engaged lead. Once you've set up those custom events within GA4, you can then mark them as key events, and you can then start to build a picture of your user journeys and see where people are coming from and how they get to these final steps or actions, as it were. So now we're going to talk about sessions, so bringing together those events into a session. So events collectively form a session. And this is all really key when you're looking at GA4 next. When you next open up your GA4 property, hopefully some of this information that we're sharing today will help demystify what these terms actually mean for you. So events, all those hits and interactions I've just talked about, form a session. So sessions are just, in essence, then a container for multiple events happening within a single visit. So the user is opening up your website and interacting with it. So let's see this is a visual example. I've got my user timeline here across the screen. We start our session here. They go on to view a page. They scroll. They submit my inquiry form. They carry on. They view a thank you page, perhaps. They scroll. They click. All of these interactions had happened over a timeline. Not necessarily equally spaced out. It might be over the course of a 30-minute session, for example. Collectively, GA4 then recognizes all of these events in a single session. As long as somebody's interacting continuously with your website in the foreground, so the tab is open in the foreground, it will still count towards that same session. If there's a 30-minute break between the last event and then another one, or if they close the tab or move away from the website, into the background and leave it there for more than 30 minutes, it will no longer count as the same session. So the next time they view your page, it will be a new session. So when you're seeing the number of sessions in GA4, this is what GA4 is interpreting them as. Because it's now event-based, as opposed to previous tracking methods, this is a much more accurate way of ascertaining how long a session actually is, because it's based on the interactions that somebody's taking. So let's look at engaged sessions. This is a really key metric, and one that I do recommend you jot down as a takeaway from today, because this is something that you should be looking at as often as you can, really. But engaged sessions. So for a session to qualify as engaged, a user must have done one of the three following things during that session. One, they must have actively engaged with your website for at least 10 seconds. They must have logged a key event, conversion or goal, remember that's the term for it, or logged 2 or more page view events. It has to be at least one of those. So it doesn't have to be all three. It could be 1, not 2 and 3, for example. But as long as one of those criteria have been met, it will be marked as an engaged session within GA4. I've got there the sort of and or there. So by comparison, or by extension to that, we can have bounced sessions. Now, bounce rate might be a term you're more familiar with if you are more familiar with universal analytics, but bounce sessions are the opposite of engaged sessions. They are sessions that have lasted less than 10 seconds and have had no key events recorded and have had fewer than 2 page views. As soon as one of those criteria are met, the session is marked as engaged. Therefore, adding the two together, you get your total number of sessions. So when looking in GA4, it's great to see the number of total sessions, to see if you've had an increase in traffic over time, particularly if you've sent out, email communications or recently set up a new campaign. But really what you want to be doing is drilling down into those engaged sessions, because they're going to indicate those sessions where users interacted or shown higher engagement levels than those that are counted as bounced. That kind of myth, I suppose, around bounce rate, where somebody just sort of lands and disappears straight away, that's not necessarily the case. It has to be all three of those criteria to be met first. I think we do have a question, which I might as well answer while we're in the throes. This is from Greg. If your process, e.g. a registration process, opens up in a new window or tab, does that mess up with the tracking with the session? Now, this is a really interesting question and covers the term cross-domain tracking, which we haven't got necessarily in this session, but more than happy to provide info afterwards. But as long as you've got cross-domain tracking set up correctly, if your registration happens on a separate platform or in a separate window, it should connect the two and stitch the two sessions, I suppose, but the two windows together. It should recognize that you're the same user and you're continuing your session on that same website. Cross-domain still would count, though, if it was the same domain, even opening in a new window, because it should be connecting the two sessions together. It should still be stitching the two in the same way. I hope that helps. It won't start up a new session, I think is the bottom line to your question there, Greg. So continuing on then with engagement metrics. So we're going to go to now to engagement rate. So your engagement rate is the number of your engaged sessions on your website divided by the total number of sessions. So just a quick kind of number crunch here. If you had 46,000 sessions, the number of engaged sessions were 25, nearly 26,000, and your engagement rate would be 56.17%. The higher your engagement rate, typically the higher the quality of your user engagement, and therefore an indication of that would be your content is of a higher quality because people are engaging with it better. In opposition to that, our bounce rate is the number of unengaged sessions on your website divided by the total. And therefore, in this example here, you'd have a bounce rate of 43%. Now, bounce rate isn't obvious as a metric within GA4, but it is available. I know that some people might be more familiar with it from Universal Analytics because this was something quite key there before. However, GA4 is pushing engagement rate before bounce rate, and we certainly recommend that too. Focusing on your engagement rate and making sure that you get a higher engagement rate will help you to understand that your users are engaging better with your content. Obviously, a higher engagement rate will mean a lower bounce rate. So it's both is obviously beneficial, but by focusing on increasing your engagement rate will be better overall. Oh, sorry, I believe we've got a couple more questions. Yes, if it is on the same domain, it shouldn't start as a new session, even if your process opens a new form or whatever in another window, as long as it's the same user continuing their session. And a good engagement rate to target is really tricky because it depends on what your website sees as an average or as a trend. But typically we're seeing in the range of about 50% is a good engagement score. I know that doesn't sound particularly high, but that is something that we're seeing on average across clients as an engagement score that is typical, maybe as a better word, rather than a good engagement score. It's typical. So hopefully that helps. Then we've also got average engagement time as another engagement metric, and that's the average time users spend actively interacting during their visit. So if we remember that user timeline, it's the average time that somebody is interacting with the website during that session. The longer that engagement time, again, it often signals more valuable or engaging content on your website that's resonating with your audience. They want to be interacting with it. And that doesn't necessarily just mean page views. It means scrolling, clicking, watching videos, interacting with forms, searching your website. It's not just statically having the window open, right? We're talking about interacting with it. And scrolls is such an easy way now for us to browse content. You know that if somebody is scrolling, they're interacting and engaging with it. So let's talk about acquisition now. So how people come to us. So acquisition refers to how users find your website. So this could be through a number of different channels, marketing efforts or campaigns that you're running, but we've just got a few examples of search engines, email campaigns, online advertising, or even social media. But there are two main types of acquisition. And again, this is something maybe really key when you're looking at GA4 to make sure that you're looking at the right reports and understanding what the numbers are that you're looking at. The first type of acquisition is your user acquisition. So where new users come from. That might sound very obvious when it's written down like that, but understanding where users who are not previously recognized by GA4 as having visited your website, where did they come from the first time they visited? So this is not taking into account where they came from the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth. It does not take into account what channel they came from when they went on to register for the event. We'll come to that in a little bit. New user acquisition is about where your visitors came from the first time they came to you. Often this will be through marketing efforts and channels such as PPC, where you might be doing an awareness campaign. So you're putting your brand out there. People that previously didn't know about you, your brand, your business, would be coming to you for the first time. Then we've got session acquisition. So session acquisition tracks the sources of each user visit, including repeat visitors. So this is now taking into consideration those repeat visitors, those known visitors, where they came from on those multiple times. It's really important to understand the difference when you're looking at your reports within GA4, because obviously they're going to tell you different things. Channel groupings. So channel groupings categorize those traffic sources. So as I gave some examples there, organic search, paid ads, email, social media, these are all grouped automatically by GA4 based on predefined rules. One of the easiest ways for you to influence what channel groupings your traffic is being categorized into is to use things like UTM tracking links. So setting out what your UTM source, medium, and campaign are so that GA4 can recognize, okay, that came from LinkedIn. Oh, okay, this was from an email. This person came from an email. By giving GA4 the correct information when somebody comes to your website, it can categorize those sources effectively, helping you to understand which of those channels are driving your traffic. So now we're going to look at conversions applied to those different channels. So that's attributions, and we'll start here with attribution modeling. So I've got a couple of examples of different types of attribution modeling, and then we'll look at some examples of how they're actually applied in principle. So I've got single touch models here. Firstly, first touch or first click attribution, where 100% of the credit goes to that first customer touch point. So whichever touch points they came to your website via, and then went on to, say, let's stick with the example of registering for your event, only the first touch point that they came via would receive credit. In the direct opposite, we've got last touch click attribution, where 100% of that credit goes to the last customer touch point instead. And now this one was the default for universal analytics, and until recently was also the default for all online advertising as well. It's probably the attribution model that most marketers are familiar with, and probably we would say still the majority are looking to use for their reporting. I'll share what it's now moved to for GA4 in just a second, but this is something to look out for. Often we'll hear the question of which channels, or maybe I should say, how many conversions have we had from email as a question? And often when that type of question is asked, what you're looking for as an answer is a last touch attribution answer, i.e. how many people opened the email, clicked on the link, and then went on to register directly, as in that was their last touch. That's the model in use there. Let's look then, by contrast, at some multi-touch models. First, we've got linear attribution, which is just applying equal credit assigned to each customer touch point. Then you've got an example of time decay attribution here, so where more credit is assigned to those latter touch points in the customer journey rather than those that happened earlier on. And then we have data-driven attribution, which is where credit is assigned based on the influence a touch point has had on each conversion. On each conversion. And that influence is determined by GA4's algorithm, which is based on all your other user journeys. So it determines how much influence that particular channel, so for example, social, had on the users based on all of your users and your conversions. So it's really key that you do set up those custom events and key events, because what you're doing is feeding data into GA4 to tell them these are the key things that I want users to do. And once it understands that, it's then able to map out the journeys that they took on their way to converting, and is able to then apply this credit and assign it to each of those touch points. This one I highlight here because it's now the default for GA4, and it is also now the default for Google Ads as well. You can override those settings in Google Ads conversion, I believe, at the minute. But I suspect that very soon you probably will not be able to. But it's something to be aware of. So when you're setting up key events within GA4 and conversions within Google Ads, you should know that it will apply this Google data-driven attribution to those conversions. What you might see is percentages or decimals of conversions being assigned. So you might see 0.6 conversions assigned to email, for example, because that's the amount of influence that Google is determining that email had on those conversions. So it's something to be aware of to make sure that you understand, because it is a different way of reporting on those, but it is very much fundamental and key to the reports within GA4. So let's just have a quick look at an example then of attribution modeling. I am aware that there are more questions coming in, but possibly more than I can keep up with at the minute. So maybe we'll go through a few altogether in a little while. So attribution modeling, if we look here at my user timeline, we start off with our first touch point with a PPC ad. Our new user clicks on a PPC ad. They follow our social pages and they visit our website and then go on to sign up to our emails. They then click on a link in an email, and then finally they go on to buy a ticket or register for our event. I mean, that end key event could be signing up for a membership, it could be taking out a subscription, it could be any key event that we need it to be or want it to be. This is just an example of our user timeline. So if we first look at last touch attribution, we would see 0% of the credit assigned to both the PPC ad and the social post, and only 100% of that credit assigned to the email instead, because that was the last touch point of the user before they went on to do our key event. By comparison, we've got our data-driven attribution, and these are just example numbers, but this is the type of thing you might see. So you could see 45% of that credit assigned to the PPC ad, 5% to social post, 50% to email. And again, this is all calculated based on the machine learning of GA4 of all of your user journeys that are happening. So this is going to be constantly evolving the more data that's fed into GA4. So let's summarize then why GA matters. So it gives you and your B2B marketers the tools to track, analyze, and optimize every stage of your customer lifecycle. Event-based tracking, monitoring those specific user actions like signups, form submissions, or downloads, gives you detailed insights into your key interactions. It tells you exactly what people are doing on your website in summary. Sessions and engagement metrics, so those engaged sessions, the engagement rate, and the average time spent, gives you an indication of that user behavior and the level of engagement that they have with your content. The higher your engagement metric numbers, typically the better your content is, because people are engaging with it better. It's resonating better with your audiences. And we've got acquisition insights, so identifying the channels that are driving your traffic. So that could be new users, but it also could be driving just in terms of sessions, allowing you to optimize for marketing spend and targeting. So if you are seeing that you are getting a lot of new users from your online advertising, potentially that's because your marketing spend is working. You're targeting well. You might want to couple that with your engagement metrics just to check, are the people that are coming from our PPC ads also showing that they have an high engagement rate? That would indicate we're targeting the right people and we're getting high value leads in there. Then we've got our attribution models, which evaluate which of those touch points in the customer journey contribute most to our conversions and revenue growth. And understanding those is so fundamental to knowing then where you need to be putting your marketing efforts to make sure that you are getting the most ROI out of those channels. And I put here so much more. We've just touched upon some key areas here which should give you a fundamental understanding of how GA4 works, and sort of some really key things that hopefully you can take away from today's session. But there is so much more that you can do with GA4. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So what questions should you be able to answer? And want to do a bit of an exercise here to see how many you actually can. So let's have a look at these questions. Can you answer these for yourself? So what content is performing best? If we're looking at engaging content, maybe we need to know from an editorial point of view where we should be focusing our future efforts. In fact, do your editorial teams know where they should be focusing their next efforts for upcoming content? Do we know which is getting the highest engagement rate? Do we know which is getting and generating the most engaged sessions? Growing our audiences. So understanding where those new website visitors are coming from in terms of channels, our campaigns, which ones are working well. Similarly, driving revenue, which marketing channels drive the most revenue, or potentially which are driving the least, and is that a concern for us? And then finally, optimize journey. So understanding where in our user journeys are they dropping off? Where in the funnel are they dropping off? So we're going to do a quick poll to ask how confident are you to answer these questions. That should be on screen for you now, but if I can just find my mouse again, I'm just going to go back so that I can bring up those questions on screen just very briefly. How confident would you be in answering these questions or similar? Or how confident would you be in asking your team and knowing that they would have the answer? We'll give it just a moment there for you to all submit your response, and then we'll have a quick look at those. Just give it a moment and we should be able to see. Great. Okay, similar, I suppose, to the responses that we had for the first question. Again, we have very few of us that are on the call today that are very confident and feel that they have full visibility of being able to answer these types of questions. We have a lot that are in the middle, which are somewhat confident that you would know some of these answers, but maybe not all. Got 33% that would be unsure and would admit that they were guessing what they would like. And then we have a few there that are not confident and identify already that it's a gap you need to fix. So thank you so much for being honest. It is helpful for us to know, but it's helpful for your colleagues and peers to know as well where we all are. So let's look now at the most common challenges and pitfalls with GA4 and integrating it within our business. So the first challenge is having no setup at all, or having the out-of-the-box setup that was the default when GA4 was launched. We're seeing so much within our clients. I mean, it's absolutely the number one challenge that we're seeing amongst a lot of clients is that there is just no tracking or a very poor level of optimization that exists, which just means that you have no data, and so you cannot have any data-driven decision making. So without that data and insights, you cannot make informed decisions about which marketing channels you should be investing and which are not working well for you. That is absolutely challenge number one. And certainly if you did answer not confident at all, you are not alone in that challenge. Coupled with that, then challenge number two is a complete lack of skills or knowledge, expertise in-house around GA. So we know that getting GA4 right can be complex. It can be simple to do an initial setup, but to get it right for you and your business can be complex, and internal teams can lack expertise around that. And without that proper knowledge, your teams might be struggling to configure things correctly, which could lead to inaccurate data or incomplete data. So you could be having reports that just don't have the right data in them at all. Coupled with that, many businesses fail to define the key performance indicators, which make it difficult to measure success effectively. And we're not talking about your KPIs as individual team members. We're talking about your KPIs in terms of those GA4 metrics. The ones that I was alluding to before, things like engagement rate, things like average session time, but many more as well. Without identifying what those are or knowing how to identify what those are, it can really make it difficult to measure what success is like. It's great to say what things are performing well, but what do you mean by performing well? What are the things that actually should feed into that? And then challenge number three that we're seeing so often, you could be coming, to us today with a confidence in your analytics setup. It is done right. We do have the skills in-house. But this challenge can really still set you back, which is not having your reports configured in the way that is most optimal for you. So this could be your own GA4 reports within GA4 as a platform itself, or it could be external reporting tools such as things like Google Looker Studio. But having that data collected, but not having it actionable. So putting it into a format that is actually readable, digestible, so that you can understand that and make decisions on it is such a key part of this as well. So many businesses actually still rely on those default reports within GA4, which means that you're completely missing out on valuable custom insights that could drive better marketing decisions. So like I said, having it set up right, having the expertise in-house is great, but if you're still relying on just the out-of-the-box reports and you haven't yet moved on to that customized configuration of the reports, you're still not seeing the right insights. Without those, your marketers are going to be wasting time sifting through irrelevant data. And like we say, instead of focusing on those actionable insights instead. So now let's look, oh no, before we do, third and final poll. We just want to get a sense here of whether people currently have, whether you as a business currently have some form of marketing performance dashboard in place, and does it give you the insights you need to make informed decisions? So really around that last challenge, it'd be good to gain an understanding. So sorry, every time the poll comes up, I lose my mouse. So yeah, the options that we have, yes, we do, and we're really confident in our marketing dashboard. We sort of have one, but it's a bit vague. I've got loads of data and it's stuck in spreadsheets, or I don't have any visibility of our marketing performance in any sort of dashboard. This is separate from just GA4 existing. We're talking about, do I have that information available to me in some form of reporting dashboard that is then used to make decisions? We'll just give it a moment longer for those answers, and then we'll see. Okay, great. So it looks like we have 14% of those on the call today have yes, we do have some form of marketing performance report in place, which is excellent. We do have a majority, though, of 67% saying we do kind of, but answers are vague at best. So we're not sure in general that they are put in the best way or they are formatted in the best way. And then we've got the rest of the call stuck in spreadsheet purgatory. Now, it could be in spreadsheets, it could be elsewhere, but it's really interesting to hear. We've got some data, but not necessarily in the place that we can just start to pull that out into useful reports. So thank you very much for your responses on those polls. We will now continue into what we can do about those challenges. So we've paired each challenge with a key solution that we think would be useful as takeaways. So the first one is to conduct the GA4 audit. It's absolutely crucial that you sit down and you stop and you think about what it is you need from GA4 for your business. So the first step is understanding your key objectives. So what are your key performance metrics? What are your key measures of success that you need to be monitoring in order to understand how you're performing, how your business measures success. And then number two, conducting a GA4 to get a GA4 audit to get a baseline. And these are the types of questions that you should be asking during that audit. Is it installed correctly? Is data flowing properly? Can we see basic engagement metrics, the ones that we talked about today? Are we tracking key events? Can you see online revenue where there is online revenue to be recorded? Really taking stock of what currently exists and mapping that out. And as a secondary point, if you can have an external audit done with recommendations then to help fill in those gaps, that should really help you to get a sense of where you are with your GA4 setup and where the areas are that could be optimized better. So our second solution here is get some GA4 training, and that doesn't necessarily have to be super technical, super complex. We recommend investing in GA4 training for your team, but we recommend 3 key areas initially to focus on. So number one is understanding those key metrics. Again, building on some of those things that I mentioned earlier in the call, understanding what the key things are that you need to be uh, seeing and extracting from GA4, but understanding what they mean and how they're tracked is so key to getting to grips with GA. Then you can move on to learning how to interpret those reports. So yes, understanding how those metrics are recorded, but understanding then how to interpret changes in those and applying those to you and your business and your marketing decisions. And then three, which I've sort of highlighted here as quite a key thing, is avoiding common mistakes. GA4 training isn't necessarily a step-by-step, do this, do that, don't do that. It's more about enablement and avoiding things that you can fall into as a trap, which is, doing things. It's not going to look the same for every business, so you can't just do things by a book. There is a way that's going to work for you and your business. So avoiding those common mistakes is so key when getting training. And then finally, we're suggesting here some specialist dashboard reporting. So using specialist dashboards for easy insights, you can build custom reports within GA4 that will help to a certain point. But we also recommend looking at other ways of bringing in GA4 data, but also external data, maybe from your social accounts, it could be from advocacy tools, it could be from your CRM, together into a specialist dashboard to give you real oversight into your performance. It will give you instant access to key performance metrics. It could even be automated so that you have less manual work involved in pulling that together. But overall, the most key thing here is that it will help improve your decision making by being able to see things like engagement metrics and see, okay, my engagement rate was 60%, but that's gone up this week, or that's gone down since last week, will help you to make better decisions in the long run around your marketing campaigns. So I'm now going to pass over to my colleague, Alicia, who's going to talk us through some things that MPG can do to help you.
Great, thanks, Lucy. So we've covered a lot there, and if this session has made you realise that you do have a gap, then as you can see, you're definitely not alone from the polls. As Lucy and Helen have both mentioned, it's very rare for us to come across a business who's doing all of this completely correctly. And because of that, we've developed several ways that we can help depending on your requirements. So the starting point for most businesses is an audit and recommendations project. So here we would take a look at your current setup, any challenges you've had, what you're looking to achieve in terms of KPIs, whether you have any specific requirements like cross-domain tracking, where you're maybe going from your website domain to a e-commerce ticketing page and want to track visitors right through. So we would analyze your current setup, explore your requirements, do a bit of a gap analysis and establish what needs to be set up and exactly how. The recommendations from a project like this, you can either deliver in-house if your team has the capabilities, or MPG can implement them for you. So that takes us on to the next service, which is the end-to-end implementation of GA4 and Google Tag Manager. So the scope and fee here would really depend on your requirements. Sometimes we implement GA4 for all of a company's websites and products, or do one or two and then provide some training and a how-to guide, and your team can kind of do the rest themselves. Training, again, depends on requirements. So we have courses that we deliver for full teams based on kind of the theory of GA4, what's possible. Similar to today's session, but going into much greater depth and detail. They tend to be longer sessions. Or we can provide one-to-one training on a specific GA4 setup. So if maybe MPG's done the initial setup, we can then provide training for your team on how to maintain that and also interpret the data that comes through. And lastly, once you do have all the GA4 tracking in place and working, we can take the reporting a step further and build those marketing performance reports, as Lucy mentioned, usually using a tool like Google Looker Studio. As Lucy mentioned, the great thing about these reports is that they can pull data from multiple sources, not just GA4. So we can combine web analytics with data from your CRM, your event ticketing platform, ad accounts like Google and LinkedIn, and any other channels you're using. And so you have kind of a comprehensive dashboard with metrics that are benchmarked, so you can see how your marketing is performing. So if you're interested in any of these services or would like to discuss your requirements with us, please do get in touch. I believe that is everything from us, so we can now open the floor up to some questions. I know there are a few in the chat there. If you've got further questions, please do pop them in. We've got some time to go through those. Lucy, I don't know if you want to kick us off with any of these in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start with a question from Stephen regarding privacy laws, because I think that's a really key thing. So the question is, what do we need to do in GA4 to be compliant with UK and EU privacy laws? And it's a very simple answer. It's consent mode. Not something we've touched upon in today's webinar so far, but consent mode is definitely something you need to be looking into if you are targeting countries that require you to be compliant with GDPR. It's something that is implemented along with things like cookie banners. Look into consent mode. That's absolutely what you need to be doing, Stephen. It's GA4's own compliance tool. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think Magda's also got some additional information, which I'm sure, Magda, you can post in the chat around specific things to make sure you're doing. So, yeah, look out for Magda's message in the chat on that, Stephen.
Perfect, thank you. Then question from Bev, how at high level, how accurate is data within the channels? There is a certain level of accuracy that should always be taken with a pinch of salt with analytics tracking. It does require people to opt in to allow tracking of their activity, so that at a high level, it is not your source of truth and should never be treated as your source of truth. However, it should be used for trends and understanding general user engagement to help you make better decisions within your marketing. It's not your CRM, so it's not your place or your sort of sales dashboard where you would understand exactly which revenue you've got. It's more about that interaction and engagement and content quality as well. Hopefully, again, that answers your question, Bev. Stephanie, I know you've asked a couple of questions. Attribution modeling is outside the session data discussed earlier. It's absolutely not, Stephanie. It's definitely related to everything we were talking about earlier. Attribution modeling can be over the course of a customer's user journey. So if somebody comes to you in the February via an email, that user timeline that I shared, and then they don't come back again until April, and then they only convert in the September, that entire user journey is taken into consideration with the attribution modeling. And so that conversion influence is spread out across those touch points. So it can happen over multiple sessions and over multiple days, which is what you were saying, I think there. But it very much relates, therefore, to the session data, which those individual sessions that are happening all make up that whole user journey. So it's kind of a building block to it. So like carry on with these questions. I think there's still a few more.
Lucy, we've got one from Matt. So what is your recommendation for if we want to tie together GA session data with our own registration? So knowing which registered user is on a particular session. So there might be something here around what's possible within your ticketing platform. Sometimes your registration platform will have its own type of tracking that helps you kind of capture that information. There's also some other solutions, aren't there, Lucy?
Yeah, some things that you can do is to send across, particularly with GA4 out of the box e-commerce tracking, is send across things like transaction ID. So I mean, obviously, you're not specifying necessarily whether this is a paid transaction or not, but it can still be the case for a free registration, is that you send across some form of unique registration ID that's attributed to that transaction that's happened. So that could be an individual registration, and therefore you've got data tied to that reg ID that you can match back to your database. That's one way that we've seen that works, and that works quite effectively. But yeah, to Alicia, to your point, that does depend on what your ticketing system does allow. Then can see, is it better to look at bounce rate, engagement rate from your entire site, or only the cumulative of your key pages? Great question there. it absolutely depends on what you're trying to understand from that data. If you're looking at your website as a whole, it will give you an indication of how your website as a whole is performing and engaging visitors. But what you might want to be doing is drilling down into those key pages, specifically if you're wanting to use those as key milestones in a customer journey, to understand if people are dropping off. Maybe if you've got a low engagement or a high bounce rate, you might find that people are dropping off at that point in the funnel. It will give you an indication that's a step for you to optimize. And so it does depend on what you want to get out of it. When you're looking at these metrics, you can always drill down quite granularly to do comparisons, again, page by page. But another thing I would say to look at there with engagement rates is also to look at things like audiences. So setting up groups of like-minded individuals based on their behavior. So people that have filled in a lead form in the last 6 months but not registered, for example, and you can look at things like their engagement rate or bounce rate over time. So not just in terms of specific pages, but in terms of specific individuals as well, or groups of individuals, I should say. That's another way to use that metric. I mean, thank you very much for the lovely comments. At the end, just doing a very quick scan. I think I've answered quite a lot of them, if not all of them. Apologies if we have missed any questions there. Was there any final questions from anyone?
Lucy, I think there's one about the best tool to use for specialist dashboards. Maybe we can just talk about what we do and
yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, yes. We sort of half covered that, I suppose. Yeah, Looker Studio is that's Google Looker Studio is one to use because it integrates directly with GA4 and obviously Google Ads as well. You can set up those as data sources, but you can also add on lots of other sources as well to feed into those reports. And certainly from an automation point of view, there's lots of things you could do with connectors such as Zapier, if you're familiar with Zapier, to send across data to maybe a sheet and send that into Looker Studio so that you can see real-time reporting on lots of different kinds of information. So Looker Studio is definitely one we'd recommend to look into for that. Anything else? Any further questions? Any ones that I've missed from my team or anything further to add?
I think that's perfectly timed, Lucy. Well done. Thank you.
Excellent. Well done. A full hour covered with lots of information. So thank you everyone for attending. And thanks Lucy, Helen, Alicia and Team MPG for your time today. Just a reminder to everyone that we'll be sending the link to today's recording when it's ready and that Helen will circulate the slides via email. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of day.